I'm Frank Vaughn. It's July 11, 2025, and I am looking forward to an action-packed edition today. Let's begin by summarizing some of the stuff we've talked about this week that has been so controversial. Because if there's a way for a person to piss off in 1 week both neo-Nazis and Zionists, I'm the guy to find it. So starting out, the first question I've received multiple times that I want to answer right now is, I am confused. Have you seen EUROPA, The Last Battle? I've seen enough of it. But the question I have to pose, and I pose to this commenter and anybody else that's put this question to me, is if I bothered to list all the factual inaccuracies in the series, would you be courageous enough to change your opinion? In order to accept the premise of the film itself, you have to completely ignore Hitler's own words in his own book. You have to ignore the evidence from his own people, Himmler, Heydrich, Goebbels, all of their work. You have to basically bury your head in the sand about what actually happened during the war before the Soviets ever got involved. I mean, one of the things the film series talks about is how the J people controlled Stalin through his wives, even though he initiated pogrom after pogrom, targeting those people, among others. The Jews aren't the only people that were targeted during that time by these various political regimes. But does any of it matter? Does it really matter how much I know about these subjects? Because for hundreds of hours over the course of my life trying to understand exactly what happened during these times, some loser is going to come along in the comment section and say, you just believe the government narrative, man. They control the outcome. As if I can't reason my way through it, as if I can't learn still to this day how things actually went, not just in the Second World War, but the First World War, the Napoleonic times, how I can learn about the roots of Christianity in spite of Roman Universalism, as I talked about yesterday's live stream. The facts are still out there, how I can learn about Churchill sinking boats and killing thousands of French soldiers, how I can talk about how Vichy France actually fought off attempts of the British to land, so that even though supposedly the French and the British were allies, British troops and French troops were killing each other in the Second World War. I can still learn about all that, even though it's not in the Foundation series. But does it really matter? Because I can't convince anybody anyway. It's almost like everything I got up here is mostly useless. Let's move on. Let's talk about Trump and his trade letter. It's a great honor for me to send you this letter, in that it demonstrates its strength and commitment to our trading relationship and the fact that the United States of America has agreed to continue working with Canada despite Canada having financially retaliated against the United States. As you will recall, the United States imposed tariffs on Canada to deal with our nation's fentanyl crisis. That was one layer of tariffs. There was reciprocal tariffs, and then there were punitive tariffs because Canada is a narco state. I've covered it on this channel in the Sword video and the whole series that went through it. I talked about how we supply methamphetamine to the world, how we supply drugs to the world, how our ports are wide open, how we do money laundering to such an effect that it's actually responsible for a lot of the rise in the nation's real estate value in recent years. We are a criminal narco state. Our politicians are captured. Foreign interference, as they call it, is actually the norm. And it's all on behalf of Chinese foreign policy, and it's all on behalf of terrorist money laundering. And it's not some conspiracy theory. It's recognized in Europe. It's recognized by the United States. It's recognized by the entire world. The only people who don't know anything about it are the Canadian citizens, because they're so damn distracted by things that don't have any value or meaning. Those of us who actually know things are trapped underneath this great big weight of people who are proceeding throughout their lives, immersed and swimming and dedicated to the pursuit of empty materialism as their kids are neglected and left behind, as they shove them in daycares and public schools and it rots their minds, as they just pursue distraction. Meanwhile, their country's been ripped out from under their feet. But because they're programmed, because they're automatons, they go for the elbows up stuff. They go for the orange man bad stuff. And you better believe I've got my own problems with Donald Trump, but none of them have to do with the talking points spouted by our mainstream media or the Canadian government, who ignore the actual real things and talk about fakery and elbows up nonsense. I mean, in the midst of all this, where is Mark Carney? He's on vacation somewhere in the country, somewhere in the capital region, says the rumor. But we just went through an election campaign where this man and his party were telling us we were under emergencies unending. There was a housing emergency. There was an emergency with the United States. There was a trade emergency. There was all these emergent threats. And when he won the election, his first act was to send Parliament home after 3 weeks of very limited sitting of the House. The status quo remains. The emergencies, there's clearly no emergency if the man is on vacation. And his voters, if you look at the polling, even though polls tend to be just fake news outside of election season, because they have to come together at election season, they have to start being accurate or they have no credibility. So even though we're drifting back into post-election territory where you can't really believe anything that's coming out of the mainstream polling houses, you can bet your bottom dollar that nothing has changed with the political alignment in this country. The people who vote for this, they don't give a good damn about the facts and what's actually going on. It's frustrating as hell to those of us who are actually paying attention. Canada retaliated with its own tariffs. Starting August 1st, 2025, we will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent to the United States, separate from all sectoral tariffs. Goods transshipped to evade this higher tariff will be subject to that higher tariff. As you are aware, there will be no tariff if Canada or companies within your country decide to build or manufacture products within the United States. Also, I must mention that the flow of fentanyl is hardly the only challenge we have with Canada, which has many tariff and non-tariff policies and trade barriers, which cause unsustainable trade deficits against the United States. Canada charges extraordinary tariffs to our dairy farmers, up to 400%. And that is even assuming our dairy farmers even have access to sell their products to the people of Canada. So the dairy farmers are so powerful in Canada. They have their own lobby group, and they are maybe second only to communist China in terms of influence on our government's policies. Whether you agree with that or not is off the table. Trump has legitimate beef here. No pun intended. Canada charges enormous tariffs to the world. And the vast majority of people who support both the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party have no idea how unfair Canada's trade practices actually are. And while the United States has for all of these years accepted the fact that Canada is going to do this, we insult them, we demean them, we take advantage of them. We're more than happy to take their capital. We're more than happy to insult them as we live under their defense umbrella, as our own soldiers are on army bases that are contaminated with forever chemicals, people getting cancers and dying, painting rainbow sidewalks and doing all this progressive nonsense, doing everything except building a military that could actually defend Canada. We just take for granted the fact that the United States will do all the work for us. And on top of that, we have one of the largest drug trades in the entire world. And if you deny that, you're in denial of basic facts. Everybody leans on seizure data. Nobody understands that seizures don't factor into the equation. It's about what gets through completely unmolested and ends up being sold and killing Americans. Trump has a valid point. Even if there was nothing at all going into the United States in terms of drugs manufactured here in Canada, if you just look around your cityscapes, you will see the evidence of your eyes, if you can just peel the scales off them. Somewhere between 40 and 60% of Canadian goods will be subject to these 35% tariffs if they actually end up being applied, because chances are the government's going to fold and give the Americans what they want, much to the disappointment of many Canadians who are paying attention. But for those who are just completely distracted and obsessed with their material lives and the vacuous nature of their attention spans, it won't really matter anyway. Personally, I hope that Doug Ford and Mark Carney decide to fight the Americans and go right to war like all their tough rhetoric during the election. I hope they live up to it, because suffering is probably the only thing that's going to wake Canadians up. But don't expect it to happen quickly, because everybody's going to be blaming the orange man because they're so superficial they can't understand how stupid such an approach actually is. But let's talk about the fact that I can identify that Donald Trump is 100% correct when it comes to Canada, but I am worried about so many other things that are going on. Hand to God, I know the names. Alan Dershowitz says he knows who's on Epstein's list 2 days after the FBI leaked a memo to Axios revealing that the Epstein case is effectively closed. He killed himself, and there's no list of clients Former Epstein attorney and associate Alan Dershowitz says he knows exactly who's on the Epstein list and why it's being suppressed to the public. I have seen, remember, I was falsely accused. Let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. This is a big cover-up by the Trump administration. Bill O'Reilly, longtime friend of Donald Trump. Donald Trump says Epstein files could destroy people. Bill O'Reilly, a former Fox host, said he had a conversation with President Donald Trump earlier this year about the Jeffrey Epstein files, which the president said could destroy innocent people. He said, and I agree, there are a lot of names associated with Epstein that had nothing to do with Epstein's conduct. They maybe had lunch with him or maybe had some correspondence or one thing or another. If that name gets out, those people are destroyed because there's not going to be any context. So Trump is protecting himself. He's protecting his friends. He may have nothing to do with the blackmail ring. He may have nothing to do with the people that were trafficked by Epstein to the world's powerful. What he's saying, and this might get close to the real reason, is that he wants to protect innocent people who are friends of his, and for that, he's going to prevent justice for those underage minors who were sex trafficked. Does it get any more horrible? Clarification in a big investigation like this could be handled by your politicians and could be handled by the attorneys involved and the people responsible for investigating. They could specify that various people who are named on the list, they could do investigations and they could provide the facts and say that this person, this individual who's named, didn't do anything wrong. This individual over there did horrible things. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for this repression. Jeffrey Epstein's brother breaks silence on bombshell FBI memo. Mark Epstein, brother of late Jeffrey Epstein, dismissed a bombshell memo from the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation that declares the disgraced financier's 2019 death a suicide, accused the government of covering up the truth. It's not really an accusation. It's an accu-fact. The government is totally covering this up, and maybe now we know why. Trump is protecting his friends. Even if they're innocent, standing in the way of justice for all of the victims and not prosecuting those who are guilty, this is the weakest excuse. It's heartless, it's unjust, it's ungodly, and if you are allowing yourself to be an apologist for it, you should know some serious shame. Trump admin teases resumption of anti-Houthi airstrikes after ship attacks. The Middle East war is not over. War goes through active phases and it goes through inactive phases. Currently, we are in a ceasefire phase, but nothing is done. And the scary thing is, White House acts surprised to Ukraine weapons pause. Two U.S. officials spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity, have confirmed the resumption of arms and ammo deliveries to Ukraine's military, which include 155mm artillery shells and GMLRS precision-guided rockets. So Trump, when he spoke about the arms shipments to Ukraine, he said that the weapons would be mostly defensive. Folks, it's just the truth. He lied. These are offensive weapons, not defensive weapons. These are not just countermeasures. And this goes a long way to further depleting very thin American stockpiles of weaponry. It also gets a long way from the peace that Trump promised during his campaign. I just want people to wake up, because in less than 1 week, basically 1 week, Trump's policy shift is like a U-turn on so many files, Ukraine being only one and Epstein being another. This is from July 2nd, U.S. halting some weapon shipments to Ukraine as own military stockpiles plummet. And Trump was out there backing up the stop of shipping to Ukraine. And then yesterday, he was acting aghast and surprised and said he didn't know who signed the order to stop weapon shipments. It's an abrupt U-turn. It should honestly wake people up. Trump to use presidential authority. Holy jump in this website. Authority to send weapons to Ukraine. Sources say President Donald Trump, for the first time since returning to office, will send weapons to Kiev under a presidential power frequently used by his predecessor. So he is personally intervening to make sure weapons continue to flow to Ukraine. U.S. Patriot missile stockpile, a fraction of what the Pentagon needs. So if the United States is called to fight a war, maybe outside the Middle East, every day that goes by that they're involved in the Middle East, in Yemen, in shipping supplies to Ukraine, and perhaps renewed bombing and campaigning against the Iranians leaves them unable to defend against other geopolitical threats, mainly China versus Taiwan. I often wonder how long it's going to be before that conflict breaks out, and what the United States is going to do when all of their carrier groups are focused on the Middle East, helping Israel prosecute its war for regional dominance. NATO chief totally understands U.S. halting weapon sales for Ukraine as Russia celebrates. This was from July 3rd. Maybe he understood because he knew that Trump was going to flip his script. Because I remember reading this, and I remember reading about NATO's response, and I'm like, why is everybody all of a sudden so cool with Trump being anti-war? Do you think maybe they knew that something was amiss? Meanwhile, Russia launches massive strike on Ukrainian defense industry. This is from June 29th. But note, apartment block destroyed by Ukrainian airstrike. A 5-story residential building has been hit by Ukrainian forces in the Kherson region. These are Western weapons killing Russians in a war that we shouldn't be involved in a war that was completely avoidable. Campaign Trump rightly recognized that the Ukraine war didn't need to happen, that peace was on the table, and the West torpedoed it. He talked such a good game. What happened to him? And more than that, what happened to the people? It's incredible to me to see so many accounts in the million-plus range of followers who have now also completely flipped their script because God Emperor Trump now demands it. Another mystery that comes out of the Trump administration, as well as Israel. U.S. ends foreign terror designation on Syria's HTS nearly 2 months after Trump met its leader in the presence of the Saudi crown prince. This is an ISIS man, and relations are being normalized with a government that is literally founded by ISIS. You can't make this stuff up. This is the real world. And people don't seem to be curious whatsoever as to what is going on. Shouldn't American Christians care about Syrian Christians, about their brothers in Christ? Where are the Christians in this country when the IDF rolls into an all-Christian town in the West Bank? Now, what's he talking about there? First off, Trump, pictured here with this man is engaged in a pogrom against Christians and other minorities in Syria as we speak. Thousands have died, and thousands more have been rendered homeless or have been rounded up and interned by this guy that Trump is more than happy to pose for a picture with. And the silence, not only of Donald Trump, but the American media, his allies, the Republican Party, is deadly. There's some people who have raised their voice, but no one wants to pick it up and carry it on the airwaves. And what is Christian Malazardi talking about the IDF rolling into an all-Christian town in the West Bank? This from June 27th. Last Christian town in West Bank attacked and besieged by Israeli settlers. The last entirely Christian town in the Israeli-controlled West Bank is enduring a wave of attacks by violent Jewish settlers, a local church leader says, prompting families to flee and leading clergy to declare the town is no longer safe for its inhabitants. Ominously, settlers have set up an outpost on the fringe of that town, Tabeh, Ramallah, a 4,500-year-old community with huge significance in the story of Christ. And then you have the footage of what the Israeli settlers are doing. Nobody cares. Just like, and that's what I said about the last couple of videos. This week has been terrible. I think I'm down like 20 subscribers on YouTube because I managed to piss off the neo-Nazis and I managed to piss off the Zionists all in the same week simply by telling the truth about what's going on. I'm just going to keep doing it. There's nothing else I can do. I either quit and stop speaking or I tell the truth. I don't have the option. But God help me. Do I ever wish more people with greater reach and greater audience could do the same? Trump's immigration enforcement record so far, high arrests, low deportations. Deportations are trending low, arrests are trending high. Considering the backdrop of everything else that's going on, does that raise some flags for people? Because we just heard on July 4th, Trump announces he's working on mass amnesty plan for illegal aliens after passing Big Beautiful Bill. Now, later on, I get it, Trump came out and said there will be no amnesty. But given the fact that Trump as well, just like any other politician, has the ability to say one thing one day and say something completely different the next day, can we not expect the story to change as time goes by? Because the story certainly has changed on Ukraine. The story has certainly changed on the national debt. The story has certainly changed on Doge. The story has certainly changed on the audit of Fort Knox. The story has changed on so many things. It should be warning signs for people. You should be calling it out because that's how you help. That's how you help keep the agenda on board. This from InfoWars: ICE agents save 11 children from slave labor in California marijuana farm. Man filmed firing shots at agents. Newsom defends child exploitation. The most important task with this administration is busting up the illegal immigration problem, which is why people should be watching it like hawks. And you should be saying things and speaking loud and not just rallying behind the president because he's your man and he's your hero and he's the best America ever. You should literally be being reasonable and active because there can be no more important thing. The child exploitation alone, hundreds of thousands of kids likely sold into slavery and worse. It's not just Epstein. There's a huge mass scale of human trafficking linked to illegal immigration that so many people in the U.S. government want to cover up, and Trump, at the very least, appears under Holman, is trying to deal with a lot of the criminal elements. Should be encouraged. But keep in mind, arrests are high, deportations so far are low. And in the midst of all the concern, there is good news coming out of the United States. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy bans rainbow crosswalks, and one of the best quotes of all time: roads are for safety, not political messages or artwork. Today I'm calling on governors in every state to ensure that roadways, intersections, and crosswalks are kept free of distractions. Meanwhile, is contamination on a Canadian Armed Forces base making employees sick? I took an oath that I would risk my life for what Canada stood for. Members of Canada's military say they didn't expect that risk would include carcinogenic environmental contaminants in their offices. We're running a $92 billion deficit so far this year. We are $1.3 trillion in debt. We got money for condoms in Nigeria and all the spending nonsense that comes with Global Affairs Canada, but we still don't have enough money to actually house what few soldiers we have properly, to actually make sure their health is taken care of, let alone provide them with weapons and equipment that actually work and maintain a decent level of readiness. But we do have money for, what do you see here? A rainbow crosswalk. This, my friends, is not a sign of tolerance. It's a sign of ideological capture. It's one of the last things you want to see in your military. But this is Canada. And everything in Canada is completely ideologically captured. I cannot imagine the veterans who fought in the First and Second World War, the people that so many like to hide behind when they talk about this virtue, would be impressed with how destroyed this nation has become by the hedonistic ideology that we've been force-fed for all of these years, which has infected our children. In public school being taught they can change genders like they can change clothes. It's sickness, it's maddening. We should leave this country. Premier Smith says Albertans' desire for leaving Canada has never been higher. If that's the case, why are you so committed? Why is the Alberta government? Why is the Saskatchewan government? Why is everything that they try to do for their people? Because the people who live in their provinces, because they decided to enter politics at the provincial level, their primary concern should be what they can do that's best for their people. But everything that they do, they coach and frame in terms of staying in the Federation, just like every premier before them. Why is that? In this video, I've said a number of things that are critical of the Trump administration, and I stand by them. But the fact remains, Saskatchewan and Alberta and any other province that has the common sense to see it, their people, their citizens would be much better off becoming members of the United States with full statehood, getting the Constitution, getting property rights, getting again, I'm just emphasizing the power of the Constitution, because in this federation, your rights don't descend from God. They exist at the whim of the government and can be suspended at any time, and doesn't include property rights. The stroke of a pen, the Governor General's pen, the government can ban any personal property you think you own because you don't own property. You don't even own the land under your feet. That's different under the Constitution. And even with all the problems I have with the U.S. government, we'd all be better off. But we might even be more better off if we created a truly modern, new nation out of Saskatchewan and Alberta in total independence. Anything is better than this rotten federation that we're in. And I hope as the future goes on, I hope steam and momentum builds and we can actually have the vision for creating something truly new and inspiring. Because I'll tell you, this is not inspiring.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. Like, and if someone you know was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist.
She's not talking about Khalistani separatists who literally go on horseback marches through our cities with drawn swords and firearms, with complete immunity and impunity, without any oversight. Not talking about Hamas or Hezbollah, who, by the way, Hamas, Hezbollah, Arabs, Khalistanis, these people hold traditional values too. Man and woman and children and family, even if you don't agree with some of the aspects of it, they have traditional values, but she's not speaking to them. She's speaking of the shattered remnants of the old culture of Canada, the nuclear family that built this place and underpinned everything. Now we're extremists in the eyes of the Rainbow Brigade. Because it's not just the Army that's captured, it's the RCMP too at the top. There's a lot of rank and file members that do their jobs and conduct their duties with due diligence, and there's good people. They don't get promotions. You have to be ideologically captured to move up the ranks. And as we've covered on this channel, money laundering, drug trafficking, Chinese influence, Khalistanis. Canada's overrun and broken structurally, systemically. And if the provinces are wise, those few provinces that might be wise enough, it's seriously time to break up with her, break up with the old system, do something new. There's no staying in Canada that works. Maybe we can rewrite Canada, but it's not going to be a democratic process. The current regime that we live under, with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms replacing the Bill of Rights and the repatriation that was done under Father Trudeau, that wasn't democratic either. None of you got to vote on that. It was imposed upon you. So there is a possibility that there would be an imposition that would be more judicious, but I doubt it. I think we need real separate vision. And that's it for today. If you value real independent thought that's not beholden to sponsors, donors, Google, or anybody else, please consider supporting it via the website. Your voluntary contribution keeps me making these videos. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one.